I'm Sakir Nusseibeh. I'm the Chief Executive of Hermes. Hermes is a very unusual investment manager. Hermes pretty much invented stewardship some 30 years ago and came up with this idea that investment has to be more than about just short-term financial returns. This has evolved into becoming a full integration of sustainability and ESG factors into our everyday investment. And this this covers all of our investments, from property, where we believe in placemaking, all the way through to our equities and our bond portfolios, where we integrated in the purchase and sales of stocks and bonds and in engagement with them, and therefore increasingly integrating the SDGs as part of what we do in our normal investment. Now, we do this and we say to our clients that by accepting this from us, actually what they're doing is they're buying better financial return. So our view is, if you integrate this, it's not a risk exercise, it's not a be good exercise, it's simply a better return exercise. There's lots of work that has been done. Look, if you look at the low carbon economy specifically, the seminal work done by Carbon Tracker comes to mind, and about stranded assets, which I think brought into mind. And this research has now gained mainstream. It was cited by no less than Andy Haldane, the economist for the Bank of England. And I think most people recognize that in the long term, carbon has a problem in the sense that the value of the assets are not as good as people assume. But it goes further than that. There has been movement, and what we can see now is that, for example, in countries like China, where President Xi has taken a decisive step towards depolluting Beijing, and then moving much more into low carbon industries, particularly with cars. And I note that although the United States has so far the leadership in technology with the battery technology, particularly with the company Tesla, it's amazing how under the current president it chose to move away from Paris. While at the same time in China they've suddenly decided to move very strongly into electric cars. That's an example of where the value is. It's not the only value, it's an example where the value is. So the issue is, there's a trend. The trend is there because it makes better sense to have sustainability, not just low carbon, but the whole of sustainability embedded in your system. We can show that the performance is better for that reason. But also there's a trend. And in all investment, the trend is your friend. And the trend is moving, both societally and from a government point of view, to go to a lower carbon, more sustainable environment. And our argument is, ultimately, that just means better financial returns. I think it gives them a map. A lot of investors have come late to this party. The group of people who work with UNEP FI are people who believe passionately in the environment and also in sustainability. But for a long time, and we were discussing this in the meeting earlier of the committee, that for a long time this was the subgroup of environmental and sustainability specialists within banks, within insurance companies, within asset managers, and indeed even within governments. What is happening now is that we've seen it becoming mainstream. And as it becomes mainstream, UNEP FI gives two advantages. One, it links people together, so you have access to the best thought leadership in this field. And it allows your businesses, whichever the businesses are, to be able to access all the changes that are happening and to integrate that into the business decision-making process. And finally, for those within the institution who are believers in sustainability, who are believers in environmental issues, it allows them access to colleagues in the same community, and by leveraging the community together, actually they can come at better decisions. In lots of ways. I mean, the main one for me is access to people who are thinking about this, and therefore access to thought leadership, because ultimately this is about a competitive advantage. This is not a nice to have, this is a competitive advantage. And if you know what the world is doing, actually you can take it on board. That's the first one. The second one is, there is something to be said about a United Nations-led process. The regulator, typically speaking, is seen slightly more cautiously by the financial institutions, and therefore cannot take the overarching position there's an element of the difficulty of institutions cooperating with each other because of competitive issues between themselves. And UNEP FI allows an umbrella that is neutral, but that is all-encompassing, that allows you to access this community.